Welcome to CitizenGO Insider Interviews. Today we're joined by Sebastian Lukomski, the global campaigner for CitizenGO, which is a grassroots advocacy platform that mobilizes citizens worldwide in defense of life, family, and freedom. Sebastian has been on the front lines of one of the most consequential battles facing our nations today, the fight against the World Health Organization's pandemic treaty. This international agreement threatens to hand unprecedented power to unelected global bureaucrats. For several years, Sebastian has played a leading role in organizing global opposition to this treaty. He's authored CitizenGO's global campaigns, helped mobilize over 3 million petition signatures, and he has been present at every WHO negotiation round in Geneva, pressing delegations face to face and sounding the alarm about the serious threat this treaty poses to sovereignty, free speech, and medical freedom. His firsthand insights, tireless advocacy, and principled commitment to truth have made him one of the most trusted voices in the growing global movement. Sebastian, thank you for being here and for your leadership in this pivotal fight.
Well, thank you, Anna, for having me on, and thank you for helping as well to raise the alarm bells about what is such an important issue, especially in this time. I'm thrilled to be here. Thank you.
Well, let's just go ahead and start off because not everyone knows. What is the World Health Organization Pandemic Treaty really about, and how does it go beyond public health into the global power shift?
Okay, so plainly put, really, it's a proposed legally binding global agreement. That's what the pandemic treaty is. So the World Health Organization, in the aftermath of the pandemic treaty, proposed what they would seek to be a legally binding global agreement that would seek to govern pandemic responses in every one of our countries. And the ultimate goal of this project would be to centralize pandemic decision making, obviously under the guise of what they would call preparedness. I think preparedness is a key word here that they would like to insist on, that this is for their preparedness in future health emergencies. But really, what it comes down to be is a centralized pandemic decision-making instrument. So it comes down to things like lockdowns, vaccine rollouts, information policy, things that we've all experienced, you and I definitely, and everyone listening to this during the COVID pandemic. So really, Anna, this treaty it's completely unprecedented, like you said. Never before have we handed over, let's say, this level of control to an international body for domestic health matters, let's say. And so yeah, like I mentioned before, in 2021 they started with this push in the wake of the COVID pandemic, and of course fear was high. People were still confused. There was a lot of ambiguity in everything that was going on. And the thing is, the pandemic treaty as an agreement was looking to go long term. That's what the ultimate goal is. It's a global instrument for pandemic prevention, but it's looking long term. So the bottom line to what it really is, it's an agreement across all member states, which really represents a worrying and a concerning shift of power from citizens and sovereign nations to a global bureaucracy, which is the WHO. And of course, the concerns that CitizenGO leads in this campaign is that we believe that decisions about our health policy should be made by our elected representatives and not a dictated, let's say, one-size-fits-all global plan. So we'll get more into it, I'm sure, later on, but that's really what it is.
Okay, so which specific provisions in the treaty or the International Health Regulation amendments do you feel like pose the greatest threat to national sovereignty? And you can also touch on individual freedom if it's included in that.
Yeah, for sure. I think it all the issues revolve around one key concern within the project, which is that the WHO would essentially become a central command center for future pandemics. So under the treaty framework, when the WHO declares what they would call a public health emergency of international concern, a PHEIC, if you like, it would technically trigger a series of obligations, of constraints on member countries. So the WHO would have the command to impose countries what to do, or at least seriously pressure them to do so. And we know that WHO declarations actually carry weight, right? We've seen it. We've seen it during COVID, that when the WHO makes declarations, governments don't sit back. They actually snap right into action. We've seen it firsthand. So we don't really need more evidence for that. The treaty is basically doubling down on that. And yeah, the worrying thing is that it formalizes a pandemic declaration that prompts the governments to activate the national response. So I would say it revolves around this core issue. I mean, imagine this, Anna, that tomorrow the WHO says this is looking further, right? So if tomorrow WHO decides that we're declaring a climate-related health emergency, and then exactly the same things apply to a climate health emergency. This is all things that we have to take into consideration before signing this agreement, because they would have the power to declare an emergency combined with vague treaty language, which would open the door to let them do so. And we know that these guys are experts in vague treaty language. I mean, we've seen it in many UN documents, in many different organizations and agencies of the UN. So again, the bottom line is that we shouldn't be allowing an external body to have that kind of say. And you've got things. The emergency declaration is the basis of what would provide them with the power to do so. So there are many other elements which are extremely concerning. There are elements towards misinformation, towards censorship, things like that. But I think overall, the foundation here, the problem here lies there. That with this, they would have a massive step, a massive way in to shift this power away from parliaments and control it under the guise of preparedness for a pandemic, which they themselves would be the ones declaring.
You know, you mentioned something that is really at the heart of what would strike at an American, and that is the misinformation, disinformation, the lack of freedom of speech that would affect everyone. Now, of course, the U.S. has said they're out of the World Health Organization, but it just takes a change in the presidency for us to snap right, like you said, to snap right into place. So you mentioned the misinformation, disinformation. What provisions are in this that would clamp down on that?
Well, I think the misinformation issue is actually in my opinion, one of the gravest concerns in all of this. I mean, I've read the treaty many times, and it explicitly prioritizes combating what they would call misinformation and disinformation. I mean, they've coined the word infodemics, if you like. So on the surface, it means
it is there. It's in the treaty.
It is
that
in
they
there.
have to clamp down.
That's correct. So it's even, I can quote even, recognizing the importance of building trust and ensuring the timely sharing of information to prevent misinformation, disinformation, and stigmatization. So, I mean, on the surface, and I see this as that it's a means. Okay, they want accurate information out there. I get it. It makes sense. Of course, everyone wants accurate information out there. But in practice, we know it's something impossible to control or decide on. And who decides what exactly misinformation is? I mean, we know this is a massive problem. It's likely that the same authorities, I mean, the same body who've gotten so many things wrong during the last few years and during the COVID era. So you're giving them the authority to decide what's the truth and what's misinformation. So as you can see, this opens a door to mass censorship, really. And actually, it's an attack on dissenting opinions. Let's say you've got doctors who completely disagree that this is actually a health emergency, for example. So the draft treaty literally states the need to prevent disinformation, misinformation, and stigmatization, as I quoted earlier. So I would label this as one of the key challenges, as one of the biggest dangers. And of course, for you as an American, it's massively contrasting with First Amendment issues and things like that. So I think that's something that really sits at the heart of the dangers regarding the pandemic treaty.
Okay, so you were talking about the misinformation, disinformation, but also one of the things that we all had to experience during COVID were the lockdowns, the border closures, and you were talking about just the climate change hysteria that they're creating. So is there anything in the treaty that has to do with, if you agree, you have to lock down, you can't let people fly in, fly out, people movements, that sort of thing?
Yeah, so the treaty doesn't come out specifically and outright to say, forced vaccinations, for example, in plain words. Of course not. That would be an uproar, and it would be absolute insanity, to be honest, and it would go against a lot of national and international directives, even the UN Charter itself, let's say. But it creates what it does, and I think this is really important to actually understand and to be alert about, because what it does, it creates conditions that makes mandates more likely and easier to facilitate, basically. So it commits countries to global targets and standards for pandemic response. So you've got an example of let's say, we've already established there's a pandemic emergency which the WHO has declared. So, for example, the WHO will say X% of your population needs to be vaccinated by such date. So what will the government have to do? What will the national government need to impose in order to achieve these global targets and standards, which are directives within the pandemic treaty? So the treaty framework is essentially giving or enabling a push on governments to hit that target by any means they deem necessary. Which to me can also translate as into mandates or pressure or on individuals or whatever you want to call it. So when it comes to specific things like lockdowns, closures, things like that, of course they're not being word for word. They're not going to be so cheeky to put it in. But similarly, I mean, the WHO's guidance during COVID, I think, says it all, that was their method of doing things. And under the treaty, adhering to WHO guidance becomes an obligation. So if it's WHO guidance, the country is required to comply with these directives. So again, if the WHO decides lockdowns are science-based approaches in the next outbreak, our countries, yours and mine, will feel the pressure to enforce the measures by whatever means necessary. And it might technically not, it might not be a lockdown, it might be other things, but our leaders will have no choice but to commit to this internationally.
Okay, so you have been at the negotiations in Geneva. You've witnessed some of the things. As a matter of fact, when we were there together, we saw them having, trying to shut down what we were doing, trying to shut down what we were saying about the pandemic treaty. But understanding the talks, you've kept your hand on that, you know the pulse of it. Do you feel like there's a desperation at this point, or do you think they feel like they've got it in the bag? What do you think is going on in their minds there?
I love the question, because I can talk about the ups and downs that we've had as I'd say the leading organization combating this project, but the ups and downs that they've had have been pretty evident and pretty crazy as well. Things were going well for them from 2021 onwards. They kept it under the radar. It was all going great. They got away with, for at least the first year, with barely any media attention, if any at all. No one really knew what the WHO pandemic treaty. What's more, politicians didn't know what the pandemic treaty was. It was unbelievable. I was having talks with politicians, with delegates who in permanent representations in New York, in Geneva, who didn't know what a pandemic treaty was. And I think now it's coming up to the table, largely thanks to what we do, thanks to the organizations who are bringing this to light and really exposing the nature of these kind of threats. When it comes to desperation, I think, like I said, it was going well for them until Mr. Trump, President Trump, in the beginning of this year, signed an executive order, which I think hit them hard. And I would say they were anticipating that he would do that, because I was feeling the pressure already in October, November, in Geneva, in the halls. They were already panicking. They were like, "Oh, what if Trump wins? what if he comes out and you know, cuts the funding? I think we got to get this treaty through. And let's not forget, Anna, as well, last year was the original deadline to finalize this. So we're talking about an extended deadline of 1 year, massive resources going into this, time, energy, resources, meetings that they were meeting every month or every 2 months. They got to a stage where they're like, we need to finish this, otherwise it's going to be a massive flop. And I think in the lead up to the presidential elections in the United States, and now more recently, there is definitely an element of desperation. They were really struggling to achieve important agreements, important consensus on many important articles, and we could see that there was a lot of conflict between member states, between countries. It was, of course, from their side, it's a difficult thing to put together because there's a lot of countries, a lot of opinions and things. But there was definitely an earthquake after the US elections, and we would try to build our confidence and our energy on that desperation in order to, you know, hit them again in the leading months to the World Health Assembly, which is now around the corner, which is now next week. So yeah.
Well, so the U.S. having withdrawn, or technically having withdrawn, they're not really out. It takes a full year to get out of the World Health Organization, along with other nations that are saying they're going to do the same thing. So can this treaty still have an impact on those that have left the World Health Organization?
Well, that's another great question, and you're absolutely right, Anna. I mean, the case of the United States, I think we have to be very careful because it is still very vague and actually very confusing to many right now. So as we've discussed, President Trump did issue an executive order to withdraw the United States from the WHO. And yeah, that's a great first step, but it didn't mean all WHO and its rules are gone or have disappeared. The withdrawal becomes effective, like you said, in January 2026. And in the meantime, I mean, the US is still legally bound, not only to the WHO, but also to the international health regulations, which we haven't touched upon yet, which is the amendments that were passed last year very quickly, very rapidly, in the World Health Assembly in 2024, last year. So what's troubling is a few things here, I'd say. First is that you've got the issue of the IHR, the amendments, that the US still needs to formally reject, like every country does. Then I would say personally that we need to be basically blunt, because if the representatives are not participating and the pandemic treaty goes through, and it's perfectly fine that there's been an executive order to get the United States out. But what happens next? What happens, let's say, if the administration changes in 4 years' time? I mean, it takes a second to jump back into WHO, to pay the funding, to do whatever you need to do, and any other president could just jump straight back in. So it's better for the US, it's better for Americans, for American citizens, that this treaty doesn't go through. Looking ahead, I mean, looking medium term and long term, perhaps now they're in a better situation. But if I was an American, I would definitely not want this anywhere near me, and I would support the failure of this draft in next week.
Yeah, well, and CitizenGO has mobilized millions globally, you know, here in the US and around the world. And so do you think that, you know, you've been there every time there's been a protest, every time CitizenGO has shown up? Do you think the petitions and the protests have any real tangible impact on decision makers?
Absolutely. I think it's sometimes very difficult to see it and to feel it from a computer screen, where you're just signing a petition and you don't really know where it's going, what it's doing there. Is it just a number? Absolutely. When we delivered a number, which ended up being the number that we had to present and to deliver, of 3 million petition signatures gathered worldwide, it does hit them. It does hit them. And we are there handing in those signatures, meeting with delegates, and applying the same pressure, knowing that we have a huge base behind us of citizens, of people, CitizenGO supporters who without them we wouldn't be able to do what we are doing and to have the impact we are having. So I think over the course of these 2 years, that's what's been it hasn't just had an impact. It's what's been driving this whole movement, this whole campaign that we are also engaged in. And I think from your side, Anna, with the US campaign, I mean the signatures to Congress, to President Trump and Kennedy. I think these were important steps as well in bringing it home and making sure they signed that executive order on the first day, because there were rumors at the beginning, but rumors are just rumors until the paper is signed, right? So when Trump did sign the executive order, we had a team on the ground, as you know, and we were there and we delivered the signatures. So, and it's the same with Argentina. When Argentina, before they signed their executive order to leave, we had members from CitizenGO. Our CitizenGO team was present in the Senate, liaising with members of Congress and really putting it out there. So in answer to your question, we've had massive impact on a global level. The WHO know exactly who we are. They know exactly what we're doing. They know exactly the support we're having and how it's growing in recent months. The phone calls we're getting, the emails we're getting, it's incredible. And we've been at, like you said, we've been at every single negotiating session in Geneva. That's been driving them crazy. They wanted this behind closed doors, and we are there building pressure, meeting ambassadors. I think the result from our pressure has been exactly delays, fractures in support, and real panic, which is felt inside the WHO.
You know, having been there with you, it looks like a windowless structure, a very guarded fences, you know, and you've got the guards and you've got, it's a big distance between the street and the actual building. It looks like a fortress. So when they're in there in Geneva, in the United Nations, have you seen or heard any movement that they know that you're outside, not only inside, but they know that there's a movement outside happening? I mean, we were there, and someone from the inside knew that we were outside of the building, and they actually sent police after us. I don't remember who it was that we decided that was known that it was that person. I don't remember. Can you fill us in on that? That was a poignant moment.
Yeah, for sure.
Me.
I mean, we've had many interesting encounters and stories. I could speak all day about them and list them all. We've had they definitely feel our presence inside. But I remember exactly what you're referring to, and that was in the last year's World Health Assembly. We had a bus looping around with a clear message to stop the pandemic treaty for all passerbys, but mostly for delegates walking into the assembly halls to see. And that was looping around the UN headquarters and the WHO, and I think it really pressed some buttons, really hit some nerves, and we found out a bit later on that it was actually the head of UN security who reported us to the Geneva police and started imposing checks and trying to get us checks through the police to see what was in the bus, what was it doing. But it was obviously a means of censorship. It bothered them that the bus was looping around, and then we saw the outcome on social media. We had people from the WHO calling us all sorts of things for being there, for having a strong presence there, and like this, many other stories that I've encountered over this 2-year journey, because it's been everywhere. It's been from Geneva to New York, but also nationally and in different countries, and everyone's had a part to play. And I think again, in answer to your question, we are more than felt there. Like I said, they know exactly who we are, and I think they know exactly that the fact that we're going to be there in a week's time.
That's incredible, and it's so exciting to be on the ground, and I just want everyone to realize that, you know, when you're a CitizenGO supporter, your voice is really going there, and it's an incredible time. I want to wrap back around to talking about the treaty again and in the internal workings of the verbiage, because I don't think we talked about this. The treaty references health equity, which is one of those terms that sounds very noble, but what does that mean in practice, especially regarding some of the things that are going on in other areas of the World Health Organization and what they're doing through the treaty?
Yeah, so this is quite another worrying thing, especially from people from our ideological side. I mean, it's like you said, it sounds lovely, it sounds noble. health equity, great. But in reality, what is it? What can it be more like? I mean, from my analysis, from also the analysis of other experts, I mean, I base myself on the expertise of people who have far greater knowledge as well, and people on the inside, and delegates, and people I've been talking and communicating with. I mean, this is what we can see here is a gateway for ideology. And equity could mean access. It could mean a lot of things. Again, we spoke about the ambiguity. We spoke about vague language, and this is another example of this, isn't it? I mean, equity can talk about experimental treatments. It can talk about abortion. It can talk about reproductive rights. It could really mean anything, if you like. What is equity? Unless you've defined it properly, pen on paper. So the language is vague, and this is a classic weapon, a classic tactic that they use, weaponizing to push controversial policies. And I think the WHO has been connected with policies like population control or sterilization, things that don't, like, at first glance seem pretty far-fetched, but then when you give them the instruments and the methods to delve in, I think there are things really that can bring some concern. So this is health policy being used, let's say, as a Trojan horse for perhaps, you know, other goals, which whether it's the UN, whether it's the WHO or other UN agencies, you know, it's all pretty interlinked as well at the end of the day. And one thing I wanted to just quickly add, if I may, about this wording. There's another thing in the pandemic treaty called the One Health approach. You may have heard of it. It's another of these buzzwords, beautiful buzzwords, and it's like the philosophy that, let's say, human health is really interconnected with animal health and the environment, and anything really assimilated to the environment, right? So in the pandemic treaty, One Health is used to, it's like, really, it's a means that they have to expand their domain. So imagine if they restricted it to humans. Well, no, now you've got animal health. Oh, now you've got environment. And I think you can see where I'm going with this. If you start giving them more and more ideas and more powers, then that just increases the authority they have. So let's take, for example, you know, One Health would be, again, it can mean anything, like we said before, but you've got climate, farming, wildlife, you name it. It could all fall under so-called pandemic prevention, right? So I'm a bit worried as well about Article 5, which promotes a One Health approach for pandemic prevention preparedness, and this is the thing, that really it's a license for the WHO to evolve into a structure with authority in a much larger range of issues. And it links a little bit to the health equity thing we just mentioned before. So yeah, so even like a virus in animals, right? Bird flu, monkey, all these things that we've heard about things, or we've had deforestation, climate change, anything really. So we've got to be really careful about the lovely wording, the buzzwords, because they are very likely a Trojan horse for extra control. So we continue to have extreme caution in wording and language. That's why the language is so important.
You know, I don't know if you've thought about this. It just kind of struck me that COVID and all that they did to us with the lockdowns and the masks, they've said, well, that was just a trial run. But I also think in some ways it was a blessing, because it would have been able to expose what they're doing and what their plans are. And this one world, is that what you said it was? Where they feel like the World Health Organization, they're concerned about the health of the world, and it's not about people anymore. But I don't know that would we have ever even known that if we hadn't had COVID, if we hadn't had the lockdowns, if we hadn't had our freedoms taken away, our freedom of speech, all the things. Do you think that in a way the pandemic has actually ended up being a blessing to expose what the World Health Organization is up to?
I think that's an extraordinary observation, because in reality, we would probably give into this much easier, maybe even blindly, if it wasn't for what we experienced. The disasters that we encountered, that we thought were something from a movie, were something impossible to encounter in our countries, in our so-called democracies, even, right? Where we were completely stripped of rights. I'm not even talking about fundamental rights. I'm talking about ridiculous rights that are just so standard, like leaving the house and going for a walk, things like that. And I think exactly like you said, the nightmare of the COVID pandemic and how terribly it was managed, the confusion, the misinformation, but misinformation from their side, the lack of transparency, all these things, I think for common people, raise serious alarm bells, and that's why I think this is the core of what we're doing here, Anna, because the pandemic treaty is basically them doubling down on the mistakes from 4 years ago, from 5 years ago, and that's what I find crazy, and they're about to get away with it, and the only people trying to stop them is organizations like ours and some people who have heard of it. Otherwise, that's it. It's match two. It's game two, like in the playoffs, right? Game one's done, now it's game two, and they're getting back to it. And like I said, this time will be even easier for them because last time it was chaotic. They didn't know how to manage it. Countries didn't know how to react. Now they've got a structured instrument, and they know exactly what they're doing with it. And let's not forget as well, I think it's crucial here as well, the big pharma lobby behind it, who are obviously behind the scenes are the biggest winners, are the profiters, are the people who are making the money on these restrictions, on these mandates, on the way they strip freedoms from us. Someone's always benefiting. When there's wrong being done, someone's always benefiting on the other side. So I think it is a blessing in disguise that we know exactly what we went through. And I think we need to hold that close to our heart and to our minds in the next few weeks, while we watch what exactly is going on and what exactly could unravel from here.
Having been on the ground there, there were delegates that would come out and to meet us and greet us. And do you feel like that we have any friends? Do you think there's anyone, is there anyone on the inside that's making these decisions that's actually on our side with this? Or, you see what I'm asking you? Do you think there's anyone?
It's a bit difficult to establish like a yes or no approach because of the complexity of national governments, on who they send, on who the delegates are. I mean, we know the cases of the US and Argentina are perfect cases of exactly what every country really should have done, in my opinion, in our opinion. And they've played it perfectly, and they've done the right thing. There's people on the inside very skeptical, but there are also people who are trying. There are those who want to just go in with what I would say is the globalist movement and facilitate global power, centralized power. I think for them it's always an easy vote. And there's those in the middle, which are exactly those we are trying to approach in these last few months, which are the ones we've been meeting with, which are the ones who may flip the vote if we're lucky. And I think the truth is that perhaps a representative has the rationale of understanding that what exactly everything we've discussed about COVID and all these things, and that this pandemic treaty is not beneficial at all. It's detrimental to the citizens of their country. However, the final word is in the national government. It's the ministers voting, but it's the final word. The national government does have it. And I know, for example, in the case of the EU, which I follow closely, I mean, the EU has really, they're calling the shots for all member states. So it's difficult, and I think it's difficult. What I've noticed actually, this is quite interesting. I think what I've noticed in Geneva is that those who have been opposing to certain articles are seen as the troublemakers, and they're seen as the disruptors. And okay, you're just going to delay it further. We're already 3 years in. Come on, get on with it. And it's kind of that kind of approach, on and on and on. So there is pressure definitely to get this through. I mean, Tedros has been saying it for over a year now. Let's finish this. Come on, got to get this past the line. And I think delegates feel the pressure and they want to mark it on the checklist as a success. Look, I've done this. We've unified global preparedness for pandemics. It's fantastic. We're all collaborating together. But really, on the inside, it's a completely different story.
So at this point, then, what is your message to just an everyday citizen who values freedom, truth, autonomy, feels powerless, watching these global decisions unfold that's going to dictate our lives. What's the answer for us right now? What do we do?
So many things to say, but I would say the key here is not to feel powerless, because we, even though we're on the outside, we're a movement from the outside. We're not politicians, but we have power. We have a base for 3 million people behind us. We have a growing number of people who, like I said, our inboxes are bombarded. They've been calling me, emailing me in the last few months nonstop. People who are really supporting the cause. So hope is key. I think we've managed. We've had success. We've had huge success. We've delayed them not once, twice. We've delayed them in May 2024, and we've delayed them again in December 2024. This is their third attempt. I mean, for such an important institution, it's pretty embarrassing that they've had to go this far. And it's not by chance. Of course, they've had their internal issues, but it's because of the external pressure that we've been applying on them. And I think if we continue this and bring it into next week, into the World Health Assembly next week, and bring it to Geneva and bring that energy and that hope and that movement behind this cause, I think there's room to keep pressing, keep pushing these delegates to vote against, but really also to expose, because I think the exposure is what really hurt them. The exposure, when they thought it was, like I said at the beginning, when they thought it was under the table and it was all behind closed doors, it was going great. There were no issues. Now the issues start when it really came to light, and really it's attracting more and more attention. So I would say to everyone out there, if you're like me, extremely concerned about this treaty and what the consequences and the repercussions they can be for you, for your family, for your job, for your health. Really, at the end of the day, this is also about health. And for your freedom, because you're the one who should choose about how you go ahead with your health choices. So I would say don't give up. The treaty is not inevitable. Even if we do lose the vote in Geneva next week, we'll be on there next. We'll continue. We'll take it onto the national parliaments. We'll take it to national level. We'll be there. Don't worry about that. You can count on that. And yeah, like I said, you guys have already helped us delay the treaty, so we got to go there and give it our all and finish the job. Let's keep signing petitions. Let's keep every petition you sign is key. It puts pressure. It's another number in the lawmakers, in the delegates' inbox. Just stay with us. Speak up online and talk to your friends, talk to your family, because freedom isn't protected by silence. It's exactly these kind of actions that we need to mobilize together.
Well, Sebastian, thank you so much for your tireless commitment to this, for standing up where so many have remained silent. And I love that what you just said about silence doesn't ever win any of these battles. So thank you for giving voice to the concerns of millions around the world. And I'm so proud of the millions that have stepped forward. Your insight, firsthand experience, and clarity on what's truly at stake here are invaluable as we continue this urgent fight for sovereignty and freedom. So I really appreciate your time today. And more importantly, I really appreciate your leadership. You are incredible. Thank you for being with us today.
Thank you so much, Hannah. It's been amazing to have this conversation, with really important conversation with you today, which is, I think, is crucial in the lead up of what's to come. So thank you so much. It's been a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a great day. And so from CitizenGO Insider Interviews, this was Sebastian Lukomski, and we're so glad he's on our team, and aren't you glad he's on your side?